Welcome in to Words with Wallace. I'm your host, Nick Wallace, coming at you. It's Saturday, April 18th, aka the first day of the NBA playoffs. I'm fired up, if you couldn't already tell. Ideally, probably would have got this podcast out maybe a little bit earlier in the week. That way, a few of you guys could have maybe heard this before all of the game ones that we have scheduled for today and tomorrow. But that's on me. Had a little bit of work stuff going on this week. Had some travel. Had a smooth little 6-hour delay coming out of the Houston airport, which was my own fault for not driving. Here we are. We are going to get this out before the games start at noon. And I'm pretty fired up for round one, and I'm also pretty happy with the play-in product. We're coming off the heels of what was a really fun NBA play-in week. Whether you think the 9 and 10 seeds should have a shot at even making the playoffs is maybe a conversation for a different day, but the play-in games, especially on the first and second day, were really entertaining. It was a humongous jump from the end of the regular season and the quality of games that we were used to seeing for the past couple weeks. So I like play-in week. It really sets the tone for the playoffs kicking off today. And on this podcast today, I do have to give you all of my NBA awards. I know the ballots I don't think are even due yet, which is kind of odd. Maybe they were due last night. Not that I have a real vote anyway, but I like to kind of follow the process of what all of the voters do for all of the NBA awards that we're going to talk about today. And we did have a pretty big update to the awards and the folks that are eligible that we'll talk more about. So I'm kind of glad that I waited a little bit. But we are going to go through all of my NBA awards picks. Then after that, we'll briefly talk about the play-in games. And then I'll quickly go through a bit of a playoff preview as well. I don't think there's going to be a ton of shock in round one. Maybe I'll be wrong. And I will give you my NBA finals pick at the tail end of this episode as well. So stay tuned for that. Loaded podcast. I hope you guys enjoy. So let's get into our NBA awards for the 2025-2026 NBA season. So we will kind of build up to what I think are the most interesting awards. But at the top, we have to start with Executive of the Year. That's an award that people always forget about, to be honest with you, but when we think about roster building and especially navigating this new NBA salary cap situation that we've had for the past couple years, navigating that first and second apron, I think the executive's job has gotten a lot harder the past few years, and it's really crucial to work around the margins in order to build a successful team. So I do like this award. I do pay attention to it. And for all of these awards, I'm going to go through and give you guys like my 3 finalists. Obviously, for like the all defensive teams, all rookie teams, all NBA teams, we will have 5 people on all of those teams, and we will talk about snubs for those as well. But for all of the individual awards, we will give you 3 finalists and my eventual pick. So the finalists for this award, I think, are Brad Stevens of the Boston Celtics, Brian Wright, if you guys are not familiar, that is the general manager of the San Antonio Spurs, and then Sam Presti, he's like GM and president of basketball operations for the Oklahoma City Thunder. So 3 great candidates, 3 of the best 4 teams in the NBA. But my pick for Executive of the Year this year is going to be Brad Stevens. And I am a bit of a homer, and this does kind of bleed over into the next award, which is going to be Coach of the Year that we'll talk about here in a second. But I just feel like the moves that Brad Stevens made in what was supposed to be a gap year for the Celtics, kind of like a retooling year, it really just showed how excellent he is at this stuff. All of the guys on the Boston Celtics were extremely valuable in getting the Celtics to this point where they were comfortably the 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. And we're not just talking about Jaylen Brown and Peyton Pritchard and Derek White. We're talking about guys like Neemias Queta, who he got from the Sacramento Kings dumpster a couple years ago. Guys like Ron Harper Jr. and Baylor Shireman, who's a late first-round draft pick. Hugo Gonzalez, a late first-round draft pick. Jordan Walsh, a guy that's been in the farm system for the Celtics for several years now. All of these guys came out of the woodwork, and it just seemed like Brad Stevens really didn't miss all year long. I mean, all of these guys played really well, and just the fact that we were able to offload massive contracts in Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday and get back guys that ended up helping us this season. Obviously, Anthony Simons was awesome before we dealt him at the deadline. We got him back for Drew Holiday. We turned that into Vucevic, who honestly the returns on Vuce have been pretty mixed for the most part, but I just think Brad Stevens did an amazing job with this team, especially for a year where nobody was really taking the Celtics seriously, myself included. You compare that to guys like the Spurs, like Brian Wright, obviously had a great season working around the fringes to build what is now a contending team in San Antonio. But I do feel like the Spurs ascension, a lot of that I just attribute to Wemby and how phenomenal he is in his 3rd year. Same thing with Sam Presti. He's gotten this award in the past. I feel like we've already given the Thunder their flowers. I mean, that team is loaded and they're probably the most talented top to bottom roster, talking about the Thunder. But I just feel like the team this year to last year isn't all that different. If you want to give it to Sam Presti just because he clearly hit on another player in AJ Mitchell, go for it. But I'm going to ride with Brad Stevens for Executive of the Year. Let's keep it pushing and talk about Coach of the Year. I'm actually going to give you my top 4 for this award because I do feel like there were 4 coaches that were kind of levitating above everybody else in this field. My finalists are going to be Joe Mazzulla, JB Bickerstaff, Jordan Ott, and Mitch Johnson. Awesome candidates all around, but my pick is ultimately going to go to Joe Mazzulla of the Boston Celtics. Starting this podcast off back-to-back homer picks. I don't love that planning right there, but here we are. I'm just going to state the case for Joe Mazzulla first and foremost because I feel like the Celtics were the best coached team, the best prepared team all year long, and a lot of that plays off of the argument that I had for Brad Stevens as well, just working with a roster that was retooling, that was rebuilding, and Joe Mazzulla being able to get the most out of every single player on this roster. I think literally every single player on this roster had a career year besides like maybe Sam Hauser. I don't know. He was kind of up and down throughout the season, and I felt like he maybe was more productive in past years. But beyond that, like Jaylen Brown, Peyton Pritchard, Neemias Queta, Ron Harper Jr., Jordan Walsh, Luka Garza, all these guys having the best seasons of their career under Joe Mazzulla. And, you know, a lot of that is increased usage with Jason Tatum out of the lineup. But I just felt like every single game that I watched of the Celtics all year long, for the most part, they were a better prepared team. They had a game plan in place. They played harder than nearly any team on any given night. And even early in the year when we had issues with size and rebounding, like I kind of expected with our unproven front court, we were just able to scheme around that. And now suddenly we're one of the best rebounding teams in the NBA, getting a lot of second chance opportunities. All that is a testament to what Joe Mazzulla did. But I think if I had to pick one game all year long that states Joe Mazzulla's case the best, it has to be the last game of the regular season, right? They're playing against an Orlando team that is positioning for seeding at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. Orlando probably could have been the 7 seed, maybe even as high as the 6. I don't really remember off the top of my head, but Orlando was trying in that game. They did rest Desmond Bane for bits and pieces of it, but they were fully healthy besides that. Meanwhile, the Celtics are resting literally everybody, like no Jaylen Brown, no Derek White, no Peyton Pritchard. And guys, a guy in Shilga, like that I had never even heard of all season long, is in the starting lineup all of a sudden. And we go out there and we beat the Magic. Now, it was a close game. It came down to the wire. It took a miraculous Luka Garza contested 3 off of an inbounds play. That was like a 2-for-1 situation to give the Celtics a lead, and they ultimately closed out the Magic. But for basically a G League team to go out there with nothing to play for in the final game of the regular season and beat a team with playoff experience that's trying to win, I mean, they were heavy underdogs in that game, and they came out on top. So Joe Mazzulla is my pick. I mean, JB Bickerstaff would be my number 2. A fantastic season from the Detroit Pistons, going from a team that had to play on the road in the first round of the playoffs last year to being a dominant number 1 seed, to being able to survive those games without Cade Cunningham and hold on to that number 1 seed. JB Bickerstaff deserves a ton of credit. I just think Joe Mazzulla did a little bit more with less, to be totally honest with you, and that's why I give the nod to him. Jordan Ott of the Phoenix Suns, great season in his own right. I felt like besides the Celtics, the Suns overachieved the most compared to the talent on that roster. So tons of respect to Jordan Ott as well, and kudos to them for sealing that number 8 seed, so they will be in the playoffs after winning their second play-in game last night. And then finally, Mitch Johnson, he would be my number 4. Massive ascension from the Spurs. They were basically tanking the second half of last year, and now all of a sudden they are the 2 seed in the West. I just feel like a lot of that has to do with the ascension of Wemby and him getting a healthy season in year 3, and just the talent on that roster is really impressive. So couldn't quite get there with the other guys. I am going Joe Mazzulla for Coach of the Year. Next award here, we have the Clutch Award. 3 great finalists for this one. My finalists are going to be Jalen Brunson, Jamal Murray, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. All these guys had clutch moments, and if you guys are really curious as to the clutch stats, they do have this all out on NBA.com where you can actually sort from the last 5 minutes or so of a relatively close game. They have those games pulled out. And sometimes there's just an advantage to the team that just has the opportunity to play in more clutch games and has more of an opportunity to accumulate these clutch stats. So it's kind of a weird award. But if you look at the stats, there's really no question that the answer for this is going to be Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. The Thunder had a phenomenal clutch record this season, and they actually played in a lot more clutch games, a lot more close games than previous years. And I just felt like Shai, time and time again, a lot of those games had the opportunity to play on a national TV spotlight, like the game where he went into overtime against Denver and effectively hit 2 different game winners. That kind of sealed it for me. I felt like he passed the eye test. The numbers also support Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and he's just so reliable at the end of these games. I mean, the Thunder are pretty one-dimensional for how talented they are. They just kind of ask Shai to solve whatever problem they have. So I did go with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for this year's Clutch Award. I thought Jalen Brunson, he's always going to be the guy handling the ball at the end of the games for the New York Knicks. I thought he was awesome this year and had some pretty encouraging clutch stats, just a little bit worse of a record than Shai. And then Jamal Murray as well. They played in a lot of close games. The Nuggets' clutch record not as positive as what you'd want to see. Ironically enough, I've just felt like Jamal Murray hit bigger shots down the stretch of games than even Jokic did, so I wanted to give him some respect and make him number 3 on my list for this award. Next award here we have is Sixth Man of the Year. And to be totally honest with you, I felt like this one was one of my toughest decisions. I didn't feel like we had an obvious six-man candidate this year. My gut when I'm thinking about impactful bench players, and ideally I'd like to see these bench players play on like a little bit better of a team just so they're in more high-stakes games. And so with all that in mind, I felt like the obvious choice would have been Peyton Pritchard, because ever since the trade deadline and moving on from Anthony Simons, basically, Peyton Pritchard has come off the bench and it felt like his stats actually took a little jump, and he's right back to being the spark off the bench that we're used to. I know he's won this award in the past, and he was probably the best bench player that I saw all year long. Despite me being a homer right now, I wouldn't get a lot of pushback on that, but he's not eligible because he was starting for most of the season. And so then you get into some like second tier of candidates. Ultimately, I actually landed on Jaime Jaquez for this award. I just felt like he had the best stats, and he was consistently a really important part of the Heat's offense all year long, despite coming off the bench. He finished with 15 points a game, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, and a steal a game as well. The Heat obviously fell short in that game to the Hornets, so they're not going to be in the playoffs. But I just felt like he was probably the most consistent bench player, and he was pretty representative of the way that the Heat decided to run their offense this year. A lot of driving kick, not as many high ball screens, and so he really thrived and took a massive leap after having a really disappointing second season, so I am happy for Jaime Jaquez. I'd be pretty surprised if he didn't get it. My number 2 option for this award actually would have been Mitchell Robinson. I felt like just him, again, playing on a really good team in the East, and the New York Knicks, who were the 3 seed. He was awesome all year long and actually averaged like 9 rebounds a game off the bench. He's, I think, the best rebounder in the entire NBA. I mean, maybe Steven Adams would have an argument to be made, but ever since he's been out, I just feel like Mitchell Robinson literally swings games with his defense, with his rim protection, and just his ability to crash the offensive glass, and it turns into kick-out threes, easy looks for the New York Knicks time and time again. And so I felt like he would have been my number 2. Third for me would have been Tim Hardaway Jr. for the Denver Nuggets, and again, maybe I'm taking too much stock into guys playing on better teams and really being tasked to run a second unit in meaningful games during the regular season, but Tim Hardaway Jr., to no surprise, had one of his best years of his career playing alongside Nikola Jokic. 13 points a game, phenomenal three-point shooting. Was just really impressed with what I saw from Tim Hardaway Jr., and he's never been my cup of tea. Other honorable mentions, I guess, Keldon Johnson, Naz Reid, you could always make an argument for him. I just felt like Jaquez had the best stats, and they really needed him on the Miami Heat, so he was my choice for this award. Next award here we have is Most Improved Player, and I felt like this year, more than most years, was a phenomenal field for this. Like, halfway through the season, I really had no idea what direction this award was going to go. Tons of guys having career years, tons of guys kind of coming out of nowhere and being really important contributors. This top 3 is really solid. I have Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Ryan Rollins, and Neemias Queta were the guys that I ultimately landed on for my finalists. But I did think at the end of the day, there was one guy that ended up running away with this award, and I'd be pretty shocked if Most Improved Player went to really anybody besides Nickeil Alexander-Walker. What a jump for this guy. He went from averaging like 9 or 10 points per game on the Timberwolves last year. He had already established himself as a really important bench piece, as like a really great 3-and-D player, somebody that you saw had really awesome moments in the playoffs last year. But Nickeil Alexander-Walker had a massive leap, going from, again, like 9, 10 points per game to 20 points per game this year. 3 rebounds, 4 assists, over a steal a game as well. He just had a phenomenal season for the Atlanta Hawks and was a really important reason as to why they were able to feel comfortable moving on from Trae Young at the deadline. They can really count on his offense at the end of games, along with CJ McCollum and Jalen Johnson. The Hawks have a pretty fun trio there, and I just feel like he was kind of a no-brainer choice. Ryan Rollins is a guy that literally came out of nowhere as well, bounced around on a couple different teams, and ended up on the Bucks last year and stepped into a massive role this year. Finished with 17 points per game, 5 rebounds, 6 assists. I mean, he was really like the lone bright spot for the Bucks this season, along with maybe Kevin Porter Jr. as well. I thought both those guys played well when they had opportunities. Ryan Rollins was a bit healthier than Kevin Porter Jr., so he felt like the choice for this award. I just couldn't argue with the production that we saw from Nickeil Alexander-Walker, especially toward the end of the season. And my runner-up for this award, again, would be Neemias Queta. Like, the fact that this guy was a backup big, like our 3rd or 4th big man for the past couple years now, after we got him from nothing, like kind of rescuing him from the dumpster from the Sacramento Kings of all teams. But he's proven to be one of the best rebounders in the NBA, one of the best rim protectors in the NBA, and an above average center out of nowhere that we're paying basically no money to. You can honestly make the argument that you might even feel better about our front court this year than what we had last year going into the playoffs, because you got to think, even though we had Kristaps Porzingis, he was a shell of himself dealing with that illness. Keita is much more reliable. Obviously, we lost Luke Cornett and Al Horford as well, like two beloved players there. So if you want to say I'm gassing it by saying we feel better off with Keita and Vucevic and Garza, I hear you, but I actually don't think it's nearly as much of a downgrade as people would think just looking at those names on paper, and that's a huge testament to what Neemias Queta was able to do for the Celtics this year, just holding it down at big man. And honorable mentions, other guys that you could argue for this award. Jalen Johnson took another massive leap this year. Jalen Duren, what an ascension from him this year. A huge reason as to why the Pistons are so successful. Keontae George took a massive leap as well. I just don't think he played enough games because the Jazz were tanking toward the end of the season. Denny Advia also took a massive leap, but I felt like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, he blossoms into a 20-plus per game scorer. Easy choice for this award. Keeping it moving, let's talk about Rookie of the Year. And I'll just come out and give you my third guy on the ballot, because I do think this is really a two-man race at the top. My third guy for Rookie of the Year is VJ Edgecombe. 16 points a game, nearly 6 rebounds a game, 4 assists, over a steal per game as well. VJ was awesome, starting off with like the season opener, coming out and like dropping like 35, 36 points against my Boston Celtics, and the Sixers ended up getting the win in that one. That was an awesome start to his career. He's been so fun to watch for the Sixers all year. I just don't think he's at the same level of season as these two guys at the top. And of course, those two guys are Cooper Flagg of the Dallas Mavericks and Con Knuppel of the Hornets. Con leading the NBA in three-pointers this season. You can make the argument, besides Steph Curry, he's already the second best shooter in the NBA. Played a really important part of the Hornets turning around their season. Just the team suddenly made a lot more sense with Con there. LaMelo having a real floor spacer and a threat there. And a great compliment to Brandon Miller as well. I love Con Knuppel. I mean, 19 points per game, 5 rebounds, almost 4 assists, almost a steal per game as well. And just lights out shooting off of movement, off of catch and shoots, off the dribble a little bit, creating his own shot here or there. Holds up pretty well defensively and on the glass. I was pretty impressed with those contributions. That's not something I was expecting coming out of Duke. And then you have Cooper Flagg, obviously a guy that's going to be an all-NBA player, maybe as soon as next year. He's just phenomenal. 21 points per game, nearly 7 rebounds a game for Cooper, nearly 5 assists for Cooper as well, and also had a steal and a block per game. Really close between Con and Cooper, but ultimately I am going to go with Cooper Flagg on this one. I just feel like Cooper had the more impressive season. I know that Con was a part of a better team in Charlotte, and a team that was one of the best teams in the NBA during the second half of the season, especially if you look at those post-All-Star break numbers. Charlotte was phenomenal, but it's a little bit easier to say now, and maybe if I was supposed to turn in my ballot a couple days ago, like that might change some things, but I don't really think so. Like the Hornets, all that talk, all that smoke about them being a phenomenal second half team, and where did that get them? Out of the playoffs, right? And then you look at the Dallas Mavericks, who are a way worse basketball situation. So obviously Cooper had a bit of a higher usage rate, but he was just asked to solve so many more problems than what Con was asked to do. Con's in a situation where the shooting, we knew that was going to translate regardless. And he's playing against a point guard who is, I think, ultimately underrated in LaMelo Ball, how great of a playmaker he is. He's on a team that makes a lot of sense. He's on a team that's swinging the ball, shooting a really high volume of three-point shots. Meanwhile, Cooper Flagg is just in a wasteland in Dallas. Anthony Davis barely plays, and they ship him off for parts. Kyrie never comes back. Jason Kidd just did a dog shit job of coaching this Mavericks team. I know that that's really not the point of this award here, but I thought Kidd was awful this year, and like some games it's like, okay, Cooper, you're the point guard. Other times you're the wing. Other times you're basically like a power forward or center with what they're asking him to do on defense. And I felt like Cooper, he had some ups and downs, right? He had that injury where it felt like Con was probably going to run away with the award for a little bit. But then Cooper comes back. He has like a 44-point game, and then right after that has a 52-point game. And I felt like that sealed it. I mean, you saw the transition stuff. You saw the jump shooting improve a lot from the start of the season to now. The defense is a bit ahead of where Con is. And ultimately, I think Cooper Flagg's already like an all-star level player. And Con's really close. You could make that argument. And I know that Con is coming off of 2 really bad play-in games, and maybe that would make a difference for some people. It really didn't come into the calculus for me. I probably would have gone with Cooper either way, and I think it's going to be close, but I do think Cooper Flagg is very deserving of this award, and I'd be ultimately kind of surprised if they end up giving it to Con here. So let's keep it moving to an easy award, a no-brainer of sorts. We have Defensive Player of the Year. We do have 3 great candidates. Rudy Gobert, you could always make the argument for him. He's won this award like 4 or 5 times, something crazy. Chet Holmgren, I think, is ascended to being the second best rim protector in the NBA and the anchor of the league's best defense in OKC. But ultimately, the choice for this award is going to be Victor Wembanyama. Really, any year in which he plays in 65 games for as long as we have this 65 game rule, Victor Wembanyama is going to be the choice. The impact, the 3 blocks per game, the steal per game, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. He's the best defensive player I've ever seen in my lifetime. How he impacts guys, the amount of times where guys will just have to go to a Nash dribble like around the baseline, going right under the hoop once they get by their man, or just literally just do a 180 and turn right around because they want no part of Victor Wembanyama. And not only that, it feels like the blocks that he gets, because he's so big, because he's so in control of that area of the court, he's having block shots that turn into fast break layups and dunks at a way higher rate, because he's not just like stuffing it out of bounds. He's controlling the basketball. He's deflecting it to teammates. It's such high level stuff. It's an obvious choice for the award. So Victor is going to be your defensive player of the year. Now let's move on and talk about the big one, the big kahuna of the individual awards. We have the MVP. And I felt like ever since I started doing this podcast, the field for this award has just been so stacked. Like the last 3-4 years, this decision is going to come down to the wire. Really lucky that we've had such an awesome time in basketball. But we have 3 guys that stand above the rest: Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Nikola Jokic, and Victor Wembanyama. And I was pretty surprised about this, but I did have Wemby third on my MVP ballot. I felt like toward the end of the regular season, he had maybe worked his way up to second or maybe even first for me. He finished the season with 25 points per game, nearly 12 rebounds per game, 3 assists, and I did just mention the 1 steal and the 3 blocks per game. Defensively, it's not even close between Wemby and the other 2 guys, right? He's just so impactful on that end of the court. So if you want to talk about how valuable he was and how much that end of the court should swing the award in his favor, like, I do understand that argument. What threw me off of the scent for Wemby was also the minutes played. He did play around like 1,800 minutes this year, whereas Jokic and Shai were about 400 minutes above that. And obviously Wemby dealt with a little bit more injuries. He was kind of in and out. He was on a minutes restriction a lot of that time. And that's probably going to be the case moving forward for Wemby. Like, the Spurs' priority is going to be to try to keep him healthy. So maybe that's not his fault. And maybe you can say that Wemby was more impactful in those limited minutes that he played. And it's impressive that he accumulated that many stats. But for me, I do think that this is mostly an offensive award. You can say whatever you want about the defensive impact, but offense matters more. It just does. Defense wins championships, not as much in the NBA, to be honest with you. You need the guys that are able to execute in the moments that matter the most, on that end of the court, handling the ball, creating a great shot for themselves and their teammates. And I feel like Jokic and Shai, they played more minutes, and they also did that at a higher level than Wemby. It feels a little early for me to get there with Wemby. I do think if he plays and has a healthier season next year, it's probably going to be his award to lose. But right now I have Wemby third. So just like last year, it comes down to Jokic and Shai for me. Last year, I actually ended up going with Jokic, even though Shai was the one that ended up with the award. I felt like Jokic's individual accomplishments trumped that of Shai, and he was deserving. But this year I'm flipping the script. I am going with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for this year's MVP. He was 31 points per game, 4 rebounds, nearly 7 assists, a steal and a half per game, and a block per game as well. You look at Jokic's stats, he was 28 points per game. He led the league in both rebounds and assists, which has only been done by Wilt Chamberlain once before. He was 13 rebounds a game, nearly 11 assists. He also had a steal and a half and a block per game as well. So fantastic individual season from Jokic. He started the year on fire. If you asked me to give an award like halfway through the season, maybe around Christmas into early January, I would have said definitely Jokic, especially after that masterclass that he had against the Wolves on Christmas. But ultimately, he did get that knee injury, and he came back from it, and he was not the same guy. He was turning the ball over at a higher clip. The Nuggets did struggle for a little bit. They were around a 500 team during that stretch. He was just less efficient than what he was before. And Shai never had that. Shai was consistent from start to finish. And look, I understand that Shai's team on paper is more talented than Denver. It's pretty close. It's closer than maybe some people would think. But this year, it didn't really feel that way. I mean, you look at the injuries that the Thunder dealt with, and I know the Nuggets had a ton of injuries in their own right, but Jalen Williams only playing in 33 games, Caruso playing in 41, AJ Mitchell 57, Hartenstein 47. The Thunder were not nearly as healthy as what they were in previous years, but you wouldn't really know that by like looking at their record and seeing how they were just in control of the number 1 overall seed throughout the entire year. And despite how talented they are, because of the injuries, and also just because there was really no consistent second option for Shai to count on, I felt like they really asked a lot of him, especially at the end of the games. That's also why Shai was my Clutch Award winner for this year. His contributions, being able to create a shot for himself and his teammates. I felt like he leveled up as a playmaker even more so than last year. And he was just more consistent from start to finish. And I felt like the Thunder were very predictable at the end of these games. And I felt like Shai came out on top and was more consistent than Jokic in those moments. And Jokic, despite the Nuggets having their own set of injuries, Cam Johnson missing some time, Aaron Gordon and Christian Brown, Peyton Watson, all those guys missing a ton of time, there was a pretty healthy season for Murray for the most part. And Murray being an All-NBA guy for me this year, whereas, Chet might sneak into third team for me, but he's not the same guy as Jamal Murray. And he also dominated the head-to-head matchups against Jokic. Maybe I'm looking too far into the weeds here, but I felt like he really showed me something when he went out and they had a 3-1 record against the Nuggets. He easily outplayed Jokic in basically all of those games, especially that last game where he ended up hitting basically 2 game winners and one of them in overtime to seal the win. 2 ridiculous step-back threes. That kind of sealed it for me. And Jokic did make a late push, and you can make the argument because of the ridiculous stats and the individual contributions of Jokic. Maybe this is his best season, even though he's already won this award 3 times. But the efficiency from Shai, what he's doing for a guard in the NBA, being a little bit better on the defensive end as well. And you include, of course, the team record being a bit better than Denver. That is the case for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and that's why I ultimately landed on him for this award. Let's pivot to the team awards here, starting off with the all-rookie teams. My first team all-rookie, I don't think we have a ton of surprises here. I have Cooper Flagg, Con Knuppel, VJ Edgecombe, Dylan Harper, and the 5th spot, I felt like this was actually up for debate, but funny enough, I landed on Ace Bailey, who had 14 points per game, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists per game. Kind of funny that it worked out that the top 5 picks in the NBA draft were also my exact choices for first team all rookie. I'm not sure if that's ever happened before. You could make an argument for a lot of different guys, but I would say that Cooper, Con, VJ, and Dylan Harper are all impeachable at the top. I mean, we talked about Cooper and Con already. I gave you VJ's stats before. He was awesome for Philadelphia all year long, being in the starting lineup. Dylan Harper was in a bit of a different situation, being on a loaded Spurs team that already had Stephon Castle and De'Aaron Fox in the starting lineup. So I think Harper only ended up starting like 3 games this year, but he was still nearly 12 points per game, 3.5 rebounds, almost 4 assists. Dylan Harper's awesome. It's just like such an obvious eye test thing. I don't think I've heard any NBA media person say something negative about Dylan Harper all year long, and he's already gotten way better than what he was to start the season. So I did want to call that out. That is my first team all rookie. Second team all rookie, I have Derek Queen of the Pelicans, Jeremiah Fears, also of the Pelicans, Maxine Reynaud of the Sacramento Kings, Cedric Coward of the Grizzlies, and then my last all rookie spot I gave to Colin Murray Boyles. Queen started the year really well, and then his minutes kind of dwindled as the season went along, but he had some flashes as like a really fun, unique big man. The way he could play make, his skills on the ball were pretty impressive. Fears is really undersized, but he found a way to produce all year long for the Pelicans and became a real bucket for them down the stretch. Reynaud had really impressive stats for somebody that was a rookie. He was just playing on a dog shit team in the Kings. I don't even think that they were really tanking. I think they're just that bad, but I couldn't get there for him being on first team all rookie because I was just more impressed with what I saw from Ace Bailey. I know Reynaud's stats are better. He got a lot of rebounds and whatever, but ultimately, I don't think Reynaud's going to be that good of a pro, and I just was really more impressed with Ace Bailey for most of the year. Cedric Coward was awesome. He probably could have had a great argument for first team, but he just got hurt down the stretch, didn't play in a ton of games. The Grizzlies were tanking quite a bit, so couldn't quite get there with Coward. I felt pretty good about Colin Murray Boyles in my last spot. I just felt like he also dealt with like a thumb injury and some other stuff throughout the season, but he was asked to be like the starting center despite being really undersized for the Raptors during large stretches of the season where Jakob Poeltl was hurt, and he's just already a phenomenal defensive player, and maybe even in their best 5-man lineup for the Raptors, I think he's out there over Poeltl in most situations. We'll see what they end up deciding to do in round 1. But that is my second team all rookie right there. Let's move on to first team all defense. I feel like the defensive teams are always a crapshoot, to be honest with you. I feel pretty good about my first team. I have Victor Wembanyama, obviously my choice for Defensive Player of the Year, along with Chet Holmgren and Rudy Gobert, who we already talked about a little bit. In my fourth spot, I have Asar Thompson, maybe the best on-ball defender in the entire NBA. He was really essential to the Pistons' identity, just guarding the other team's best playmaker. I thought he was phenomenal for Detroit this year. The last all-defense spot, I have Dyson Daniels, a guy that had a generational season last year in terms of the number of steals and his defensive impact. He wasn't quite as good this year, but I thought he was still great. I mean, the way he plays lanes, I think Asar Thompson's a bit better on the ball. I think Dyson Daniels is a little bit better at those turnover forcing plays that lead to points at the other end. Second team, all defense, I have Scotty Barnes, Amen Thompson, the other Thompson brother there. We have Stephon Castle, Cason Wallace, and OG Anunoby. Scotty Barnes was just really consistent for the Raptors all year long. He's not only their best player, he's just so impactful on defense and also had 1.4 steals and blocks per game. Amen Thompson, very similar to Asar, his brother, obviously. I just felt like he was really under-discussed this year. Played a ton of minutes for a Rockets team, was their best on-ball defender. just like his brother, makes some really phenomenal like defensive highlights, unlike I've really ever seen before. So he was an easy choice. Castle, his effort just jumps off the screen. He just picks guys up full court. He's such a dog on that end. Tayson Wallace, maybe the second best defensive player on that Thunder team. He was just a pit bull. Steals at 1.9 a game. He was another easy choice. The last spot was like really up for grabs for me between OG Anunoby, Derek White, and Tamani Kamara. I thought they were all phenomenal options. I just feel like what OG brought this year, really on both ends of the court, I felt like he was really underrated, especially with Mikal Bridges struggling quite a bit this year. He's just so good at guarding like those big wings. It's going to be really annoying to see him go against Tatum in probably the second round of the playoffs. I'd be pretty shocked if we don't get that matchup. I just gave the nod to him. I felt like he had the most impressive season. Derek White is just so great at accumulating blocks and steals. He's also just such a smart help defender, really never makes a mistake on that end of the court. He's just less of like the DNA where, oh, we're going to stick Derek White on Damian Lillard or whoever else, and we're just going to shut him down, right? Like, he's not that type of on-ball lockdown defender, but he is just so additive, always makes the clutch plays. You could even make an argument for Derek White on first team. I think it's that much of a crapshoot. But I did go with OG for the last spot, and then Tamani Kamara of the Blazers was awesome for them all year long. I just felt like he was a little bit better last year, so I couldn't quite get there for him on second team all defense. Final stretch of awards here, I have to go through my all-NBA teams. And like I mentioned at the top of the podcast, I'm actually kind of lucky that I took so long to get this podcast out, because we had a pretty big update to these all-NBA teams on Thursday when we found out that both Cade Cunningham and Luka Doncic are going to be eligible for these awards, despite the fact that they did not play in 65 games. I think they both ended up at 64 games. But there was an additional stipulation that they had to play at least 20 minutes in the vast majority of those games. So I think they were both off by 1 to 2 games. Either way, they, I guess, both appealed it. And instead of Adam Silver making the call, they hired an independent arbiter to go through, evaluate the cases of both guys. And they decided that both guys should be still eligible to make all-NBA teams and should be eligible for postseason awards. So that's a pretty big impact. Both of those guys had phenomenal seasons, so it basically like bumped everybody else down from my teams like 2 spots. So with all that being said, I'll give you guys my first team because I don't think there should be a ton of surprises here. First team All-NBA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Nikola Jokic, Victor Wembanyama, all 3 locks, all of my finalists for MVP, so it makes sense that they would be here. Now that Luka's eligible, he would probably be in my 4th spot there. He just had such a phenomenal close to the season. Led the NBA in both total points and points per game at like 33 per game. Just ridiculous. And I do think that Lakers team, despite being really flawed, overachieved quite a bit, in large part because of Luka. That final spot is really close between 2 guys, in my opinion, Jaylen Brown and Cade Cunningham. Jaylen Brown with nearly 29 points per game. He was 4th in scoring. 5.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists, and had a steal a game as well. Cade Cunningham, he was 24 points per game. He was 10 assists per game. I think he was second behind Jokic in that category, and also like 6 rebounds. Really close between both of these guys. The theme of the episode, I guess, is I'm going to be a homer because I am going to go with Jaylen Brown. The Pistons were able to survive a lot better than I expected toward the end of the season without Cade Cunningham. That came into the calculus a little bit, but ultimately, I just felt like the scoring from Jaylen, the two-way stuff on the defensive end of the court, I think he gives you a bit more than Cade, and just him playing a little bit more games is ultimately what gave me the nod to go with JB over Cade. I do think in a vacuum, Cade is probably the better player than Jaylen Brown, but I do think Jaylen Brown had the better season. So I landed on him for first team All-NBA. Second team All-NBA, first name on the list has to be Cade Cunningham for all the reasons we just talked about. Also, I have Kawhi Leonard. He actually would have been my choice if Luka and Cade were ineligible. I would have had Kawhi as high as first team All-NBA. He was just phenomenal for the Clippers, despite the fact they did not make the playoffs because they lost in the play-in. So Cade Cunningham, Kawhi, Jalen Brunson, so consistent every year for the Knicks. Donovan Mitchell, and Tyrese Maxey. That is my second team All-NBA. I had a decision to make here between Tyrese Maxey and Jamal Murray for second team All-NBA. Ultimately, I gave the nod to Maxey just because I felt like he carried the load as like the number 1 option for his team. He played the most minutes in the NBA. I think he's a little bit better defensively than Jamal Murray. And so I gave Maxey the nod, but it was super close between those 2 guys. And then finally, third team All-NBA. Got to start with Jamal Murray. Career year for him. first All-Star appearance, going to likely be his first All-NBA appearance as well. So I'm super happy for the guy. Very clutch performances as well. Jalen Duren, massive leap for him this year. Jalen Johnson of the Atlanta Hawks, a walking triple-double. He was like 23 points per game, 8 assists, and 9 rebounds. Kevin Durant, despite all the struggles and all the burner scandal that happened around the All-Star break, Kevin Durant had an awesome season, like damn near 50, 40, 90. 26 points per game. The fact that he's doing it at this age is just ridiculous. So love Kevin Durant. And my final All-NBA spot goes to Chet Holmgren, mainly for his contributions on the defensive end of the court. I do think he took a small leap offensively. 17 points per game, 9 rebounds, but 2 blocks, and I do think he is the best rim protector in the NBA, not named Victor Wembanyama. So really tough decisions across the board on all teams. If I had to give you like a fourth team All-NBA of snubs, here's where I ended up. Denny Advia, he would have to be mentioned. Awesome season for the Blazers, just not my cup of tea. I cannot stand watching that guy play basketball, so I couldn't quite get there. James Harden, I know kind of a weird year for him too, with him being traded right in the middle of the season from the Clippers to the Cavs. But he was consistent everywhere he went, at 24 points per game, 8 assists. Another great year for Harden. Karl Anthony Towns, I know everybody hates watching that guy play basketball, but he had another season where he was like 20 and 10, so deserves a look. Scotty Barnes for the Raptors, with them being a top 5 seed, you could make an argument for him. And then Bam Adebayo, I mean, that 83-point game, it meant something to me, man. I'm glad he went out there and embarrassed the Wizards. I thought he had an awesome close to the season. I thought it showed he was ridiculous that he didn't make the All-Star team. He's comfortably the Heat's best player. So that would be my team of snubs. And it is worth noting that the 65-game rule, even though they waived it for Luka and Cade, it's a bit controversial, right? Because I think Anthony Edwards filed an appeal as well. He was at 61 games, had some real injuries. He probably would have been a lock for me to at least be second team All-NBA. I probably would have had him behind Jaylen Brown as well, but if he had played a full season, he might have been a lock for even first team with how good Anthony Edwards was. I think he was like third in the NBA in scoring. But they did not make him eligible for these awards, despite him being pretty close to that threshold. Devin Booker also was a guy that probably would have made third team All-NBA for me, or at least been a decision. And he played in 64 games, so I thought that was kind of unique that they waived it for Cade and Luka and they didn't for Booker. I know Booker is not on the same level as those guys, but he's at least in the conversation. I don't know if he just didn't appeal it or what happened there. But LeBron, he played in only 60 games. He wasn't eligible. Pascal Siakam, he probably wouldn't have made an All-NBA team anyway with the Pacers tanking, but he had an awesome season. He was at 62 games. Guys like Steph, Embiid, and Giannis all would have been probably locks to make All-NBA teams, but they played in 43, 38, and 36 games, respectively. It is quite fascinating that the league decided to make Cade and Luka eligible. I thought that they were going to stand tight on that, but it does signify to me that they are going to take a closer look at the rule. They'll probably change that threshold or change the language around the rule next year. So that is going to do it for my awards. Run through my ballots with you one more time. Executive of the Year, I have Brad Stevens. Coach of the Year, Joe Mazzulla. Clutch Player of the Year, I have SGA. Sixth Man, Jaime Jaquez. Most Improved, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Rookie of the Year, Cooper Flagg. Defensive Player of the Year, Victor Wembanyama. MVP, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. First Team All-Rookie, Flagg, Knuppel, Edgecombe, Harper, and Bailey. Second Team All-Rookie, Queen, Fears, Reyno, Coward, and Murray Boyles. First Team All-Defense, Wemby, Chet Holmgren, Gobert. Asar Thompson, Dyson Daniels. Second Team All-Defense, Scotty Barnes, Amen Thompson. Stephon Castle, Cason Wallace, OG Anunoby. First Team All-NBA, SGA, Jokic, Wemby, JB, and Luka Doncic. Second Team All-NBA, Donovan Mitchell, Tyrese Maxey, Cade Cunningham, Jalen Brunson, Kawhi Leonard. Third Team All-NBA, Jalen Johnson, Jalen Duren, Jamal Murray, Chet Holmgren, and Kevin Durant. So definitely let me know what you guys think. I don't think I was too hot takey or controversial with these awards, but as always, sound off in the comments if you have any feedback. So before I get into my playoff bracket that I will share with you guys in a second, wanted to give my quick thoughts on all the play-in games real quick. Hornets versus Heat was amazing. Probably the most entertaining play-in game from start to finish, and arguably one of the best games the entire year. Kind of a bummer that neither of these teams ended up making it into the actual playoffs. But if you missed it, it went into overtime. Just some ridiculous shot making from Kobe White. Some really up and down game from LaMelo Ball. And LaMelo made a lot of headlines because he did have a pretty scummy play on Bam Adebayo where he tripped him, kind of swept his leg out in the first half, and Bam fell flat on his back and then was out for the rest of the game. I felt like the hate for LaMelo Ball went a little too far. Like, I know that play was scummy and he probably should have been like hit with like a flagrant foul or a technical or something in the moment, and they just missed it. I do think it was right that they didn't suspend him for the game. That probably would have been a little bit much for him to miss that second play-in game, but there's just a lot of media people taking shots at LaMelo, calling him a clown, saying that he like doesn't play real basketball. Like, just relax, okay? He's been like this his entire life. I know people don't like the look of his face. I know he has had some off the court stuff. I know people don't like the tattoos. Like, the dude is phenomenally talented, and Charlotte wouldn't be anywhere close to where they were this year if it wasn't for LaMelo Ball. And I know he's a frustrating player at times, but I think he is just overall great for the NBA that you have a player that entertaining. Charlotte's going to be set up really well. So I just felt like that LaMelo hate went a little far, especially for a guy that, you know, he kept shooting for better or for worse, but ultimately he ended up with the game-winning layup and another ridiculous play in overtime to give Charlotte the win, and they wouldn't have been able to do that without him. Also, incredible Kobe White moments throughout that game. What a deadline move, and what a horrible look for the Bulls. And then final thoughts on that game. I cannot believe that down the stretch, there was a point in that game where they were down 3 with like 15 seconds left in regulation, and Charles Lee had Con Knuppel on the bench, the guy that led the NBA in threes all season long. It's just ridiculous. Now, Kobe White hit a crazy fall away that ended up bailing them out, but I thought that was terrible coaching by Charles Lee to have your rookie be in that mindset where suddenly he's losing confidence. He didn't play in overtime at all. I know that they came out on top, but I disagree with that coaching decision, and that probably played into the fact that Con played pretty bad against the Magic in the second play-in game too. So that was weird. Suns versus Blazers, also a really fun game. Came down to the wire. I hate watching Denny, but he really balled out. And I'd be pretty shocked if San Antonio doesn't end up sweeping Portland in round 1. Magic versus Sixers. I actually missed this game. I had some stuff going on, but I'm not really surprised that Orlando laid an egg. I will just say that I'm pretty happy to see Philly as a Celtics fan. Reason being is that Philly is obviously going to likely be missing Embiid. I guess he could come back at some point, but I just feel like without Embiid in the series, the ceiling of the Sixers is a lot lower than the ceiling of the Orlando Magic, despite all their shortcomings throughout the year. And I feel like Orlando's just a lot more physical of a team, more likely to beat up the Celtics, maybe cause an injury. So as a Celtics fan, I'm pretty happy to see Philly in round 1. Clippers versus Warriors was another phenomenal game that's going to be lost in history because neither team ended up making the actual playoffs. I think that's the second time in the past couple years where the Warriors had a phenomenal play-in moment and then lost the second game because I think they got bounced by the Kings a couple years ago in the play-in. Whatever, it was an awesome Steph game, an awesome Steph fourth quarter, and a masterclass from Draymond to lock up Kawhi Leonard. It just kind of shows that the Clippers are a cursed team at the end of these impactful games. You have Magic versus Hornets. That one was last night. I mean, shout out to the Magic for coming out and just beating the brakes off the Hornets. I do think that the Charlotte hype got a little bit out of control. A lot of people saying that they were a threat to win a round 1 playoff series, and I never quite got there because their record was still so bad that they were never even a lock to make the playoffs, and ultimately that's where they ended up. And shout out Paulo. I know he played awful in that first play-in game against the Sixers, but he was phenomenal last night, and he's been a guy that's been awesome in the playoffs in past years. So there's just been a lot of pot shots at him in the media, and I think that's gone a little bit too far. So finally, we have Suns versus Warriors last night. That was kind of a dud game as well. The Suns pretty comfortably coasted to a win there. Steph is just not healthy. I know he pulled it together for that Clippers game, but he did not look like himself at all last night. A lot of turnovers, a lot of missed shots. So it's a bummer. I saw like a Sports Center headline earlier today about it being the end of an era, ? In Golden State, which I wasn't aware the era was still going on. I mean, it's been so bleak for them, even with Porzingis playing, even with Steph back in the lineup. Golden State just doesn't have the horses, so I thought that was pretty sad. And the Suns, again, cool story that they were able to actually lock up a playoff spot there, but they have the luxury of getting dusted by OKC in round 1. And finally, I need to share my playoff bracket with you guys. So if you are listening on Spotify or any sort of podcast platform, feel free to kick on over to YouTube if you do want to see the bracket itself. I'm sure I'll tweet that out and put that out on social medias if you guys are looking for my picks, but I have it here. I don't necessarily feel the best about it once we get outside of round 1, to be totally honest with you, but we will start there with some round 1 series to watch. I do think the best series we're going to have is Nuggets versus Timberwolves, even though I feel pretty good about Denver being a contender, and I can't quite get there on Minnesota. I'm really excited to get this matchup, this rematch of 2024, where the Nuggets did end up falling short to the Timberwolves. I think it went all 7 games, and the Timberwolves just blew them out in Game 7. So we know this is a pretty tricky matchup for the Nuggets for whatever reason. You can never count out Anthony Edwards, and there is a chance he just ends up being the best guy in a series somehow. So I'm super excited for it. I do think Denver's going to come out on top, but I do think it's going to be probably the most entertaining round 1 series. The other one I'm looking at, Lakers versus Rockets. I mean, the Rockets should cruise pretty easily to a win here, especially without Luka and Reeves, but you never really know. I mean, the Lakers do have home court in this series. They are the 4 seed, so if they're able to split one of the first two at home, LeBron and the Lakers pull off an upset. And then you get the headlines like, hey, Luka might be back game 5 or game 6, or Austin Reeves might be back if they make it a game 6 or 7. Like, all of a sudden, the Rockets get a little puckered. You never know what's going to happen there. So I did pick Rockets in 6. I think that's where we're going to end up. And I'm not really betting on Luka and Austin Reeves coming back just with how recent their injuries are. But I do think that the Rockets they've been so dysfunctional all year long, despite how talented they are. They are always at risk of melting down. So don't necessarily count out the Lakers. And then finally, Knicks versus Hawks. I do think this is going to be more entertaining than most series because the Hawks, they match up pretty well. I think Dyson Daniels on Jalen Brunson is going to be a lot of fun to watch. The Hawks have played some really awesome basketball lately, but I think it's mostly a product of the Hawks just playing against a lot of different tanking teams at the end of the season. I'm not really buying them. At the end of games, you're looking at Jalen Brunson versus probably CJ McCollum, who has been sneaky so important for the Hawks. I do just want to talk about that. I did not talk about CJ McCollum enough once that Trae Young deal actually happened back in February, and he was kind of an afterthought. He was kind of like a throw-in, and I did not call out how talented he is and how much he is still playing at a really high level. He was kind of wasting away in Washington and New Orleans. I thought his defensive shortcomings were going to make him a really tough play for the Hawks, and that has not been the case. Between him and Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Jalen Johnson, they have a good shot. But I am going to go with the Knicks in like 5 or 6 because I think that their experience is going to win out here, and I do take the Knicks pretty seriously. Now, the rest of my bracket, it is pretty chalky. I do think that once we get into round 2 and we see Nuggets versus Spurs, that's where it starts to get really interesting quickly. I'd be pretty shocked if we don't end up with Nuggets versus Spurs in the second round. And I did want to call out, on the last day of the regular season, which was last Sunday, if you guys missed it, all 30 teams played, so there were 15 different matchups. The slate itself was terrible, right? Because all these teams are resting their guys. There didn't end up being one matchup where both sides were going all out, playing all their guys. The most entertaining game, ironically enough, ended up being Orlando versus Boston, which ultimately you could say is the most embarrassing thing to come of that day was Orlando going out there and losing a game they were trying to win against the G League Celtics. If you want to make fun of the Magic, go for it. I know I certainly did. But I thought it was actually more embarrassing that the Spurs did not go out there and try to beat the Denver Nuggets in that final matchup of the season. That was insane to me, because if the Spurs had won that game, they could have sent the Nuggets from the 3 seed down to the 4 seed. And the reason why that matters is instead of the Spurs, who were locked into the 2 seed, they could have guaranteed not playing Denver or OKC in round 2. They could have just been dealing with like the Rockets or the Lakers in all likelihood, maybe the Timberwolves, I guess. But that is a significantly easier matchup for San Antonio than Denver. And instead, we're heading on this crash course where Denver and San Antonio are probably going to meet up in roughly a week. And I just don't understand the logic from San Antonio. Now, Denver also benched most of their guys. I think they played Jokic like 18 minutes or something like that. But I understand for Denver because they were going to have to deal with either San Antonio or OKC in round 2 either way. And so if that was just kind of a toss-up for them, that's fine. But the Spurs, if they really wanted to solidify a much easier road to the NBA Finals, they should have gone all out. They should have played Wemby. They should have been able to beat that Nuggets team led by like David Roddy in that final matchup of the regular season. So I wanted to call out that was a horrible move from the Spurs. I think that's completely indefensible. Now, they might make it all the way to the NBA Finals anyways, so I guess I'll stop being critical right now, but at the same time, I can't get over it. I can't get over the fact that we're going to have Nuggets versus Spurs in round 2. I mean, that is a total coin flip series. So I wanted to call out that. Now, the bracket shook out wonderfully for OKC. They get to play the Suns in round 1. They'll play the Rockets or the Lakers in round 2. I think they're going to coast all the way to the Western Conference Finals. That's where they'll get their first real test. And I really don't feel great about who's coming out of the West. Now, ultimately, you guys see my NBA Finals pick if you're watching on YouTube. I do have the Spurs versus the Celtics. Now, the Celtics, I wanted to call out that they do have a tough road, right? Like, they're going to have to go through, in my opinion, the second and third best teams in the East in the Pistons and the Knicks if they want to make it all the way to the NBA Finals. And ultimately, in the NBA Finals, I actually have San Antonio over the Celtics. I'm trying to be unbiased here. I do think the Celtics, they are, in my opinion, the best team in the East. They should make it to the NBA Finals, but I do think that they are like a small tier below Denver, OKC, and San Antonio. And I think out of those 3 teams in the West, San Antonio is probably the worst matchup for the Celtics because I don't know how we could possibly have an answer for Wemby. I know nobody does, but I would feel much better about them playing OKC, weirdly enough. I think we could match them a little bit better, and I think we could also match up Denver a little bit better. So if it goes the way I think it's going to go, where San Antonio is just ahead of schedule right now, I think they'll find a way to beat Denver, and I think that they can definitely beat OKC if they make it all the way to the Western Conference Finals. That would be a nightmare matchup for me as a Celtics fan. So that's going to be my NBA Finals pick, San Antonio over Boston. Obviously, I'm a big Celtics fan. I hope I'm wrong with that choice, but I'm trying to not pick the Celtics for like the third year in a row. So give me a little bit of credit here. So that is my playoff bracket. I will make sure to tweet that out as well for anybody that's listening on Spotify or Apple Music or any podcast platforms. So that is going to do it for this podcast today. Hopefully you enjoyed my NBA awards picks, my play-in recap, the playoff picks. We did it, guys. We made it. We thugged it out through the end of what was a really rough end of the regular season. We've already been rewarded with an awesome play-in week, and I know this postseason basketball is going to be awesome, especially once we get into round 2 and beyond. So before I let you go, be sure to follow Outwards with Wallace on everything that includes Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. I should be on social a bit more now that the playoffs are here and we do have some meaningful basketball, so be sure to support the show there. I'll have an episode next week. I have no idea what that's going to look like, if we'll have a guest, if we'll just talk about some of the more entertaining series. I'm sure we will have plenty to talk about with the playoffs in full swing. So enjoy the playoffs, guys, and we will talk soon.